Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. We're going to be checking out rigid body animations today. And I've seen in the modders Discord a couple people express the desire to do animations and they don't really know where to start. And I'm really trying to make this video to showcase how easy it can be to make some animations like that you see before you. And the system that's set in place is actually really complex, which allows you to do some really awesome things. And so this first part of the video is going to be all about sort of setting up your environment and getting something to rotate and animate on your screen, kind of like what you see here. And then in subsequent videos, we'll talk about other things. All right. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to go into your folder, wherever your mod is. And I have this one here that I've already made. So I'm just going to copy it and call it simple cube. Okay. Then I'm going to go into it to the P3D and delete everything, basically. Delete. Delete empty. Okay, cool. I'm going to leave the other LODs because it's just a square and I want to reuse this stuff. I don't want to have to necessarily build it for you on video. So to get started, I'm just going to make a simple cube. F7 is the hotkey to make that. I'm going to raise it up a little bit. And awesome. I want it to be retexturable, so I'm going to give it a selection called ZBYTech because that's roughly the standard that people have come accustomed to. Fine. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and give it a random texture somewhere in the P drive. Let's grab something in DayZ, gear. Oh, last time it was canvas. Let's go into camping. Maybe we do like a fireplace or something. Oh, you know what? A flag. Let's do Alti flag. That should be good. Okay, cool. And then just quickly going over some of the other things. My geometry needs center 0. It's a component. It's a round. It's got mass. My memory point. If this was an inventory item, it has inventory view, the things that are needed. The view geometry is the action interactable component for player actions. And then my fire geometry is glass so that I can shoot through it, just for if we ever need to test it for that. Okay. Going back to LOD 0. So starting off first, we have our square. We have it retextured, and I want to just make sure things can be seen. Generally, when we're modding, we want to try and make small changes and verify in between each time you make a change so that you know what you're doing actually worked. And so this is looking pretty good. It looks like the flag on my square. Okay, cool. Alrighty. So animations, right? A lot of people think they're complicated, but they're not. They come from Arma 3, and this wiki has a ton of information about animations. It's everything I know about animations. So I'm going to post this link in the description so that you have access to it. I expect you to read this because it's very important. I'm not going to go over it in the video unless people want me to. That can be down the line. So the question usually people come to me and say, well, how do I know what to start with? Well, this is where I would start with. I'd come here and I'd grab the skeleton. I'm going to grab this. And then I would go into my folder. It doesn't really matter which folder I make this in, but I would create something, a config file. In this case, I call it model config. You can name it whatever you want. Documentation goes over more information about that. So let's go ahead and paste that into here. I'm going to get rid of some of this tutorial junk because I don't need it. My skeleton, I'm going to make my new skeleton, my skeleton. I'm going to name it that. Not inheriting anything. So we're going to go ahead and empty that out. Comments. I'm not really going to go, well, actually, I will go over. And so to create a new skeleton, you have to define bones. Bones are just selections, and a selection is a named selection inside of your P3D. So this is ZBYTech is considered selection. It turns into a bone when I define it inside of this list here. I'm not going to because I don't want ZBYTech to be a bone. I want it to be the retexturable selection. And so we will get rid of this for now and just do empty strings. We build it up from scratch. This is ARMA configuration. We don't need it. And since we're doing rigid body animations, this is discrete is going to be 1. If we were doing something like clothing or a AI NPC model, this discrete would be 0 because we want the vertices in between. We want the vertices to bend based on the weights. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Hunter Z is good, knows all about that. Okay, and then the next part is the CFG models. As you saw, I copied and pasted. I'm going to go ahead and delete the vanilla stuff that we don't need. This class name needs to be the name of your P3. So I'm just going to click that and paste it. Get rid of the inheritance. I'm not inheriting from anything. The skeleton that we're going to use is the skeleton we created above, right? So those names are kind of important. Sections. So this is the retexturable sections that we expose to from the model. And so I have ZBY tech. I want it to be retexturable. And so that's there. If I wanted another selection, if I wanted each different face of the square to be retexturable, I could make more, but I'm not going to. Oh, sorry. Sections to inherit. We're not inheriting any sections. We are inheriting a skeleton. Okay. And then we have some animations here. I'm not going to inherit any animations like they've shown in the config. I'm going to keep this like that for now. Okay. So we have a bare bones model config, all right? And what we've done here is we've defined a skeleton with no bones, technically, and we've defined our P3D with a retexturable selection, okay? And so let's say I want to make this cube move up and down, okay? Maybe a common thing, ZMag's birds do an up-down flapping motion and side to side. So this simple animation is proving a point, but is also still very useful. So in order to do that, we're going to need to create a bone. And a bone is just a name selection. And so we're going to create a new selection. I'm going to name it bone 1. I'm going to select all of the vertices for the entire box because I want the whole box to move. And I'll redefine. Easy peasy. All right. Now I'll need to go into the model config. And I'm not going to need to create the bone 1, all right? If you read the model, the wiki, you'll notice that the order of these bones is new bone, parent bone. Since there are no bones, and this is the first one, there are no parent bones. And so bone 1 is its own parent. And for animations, we might be saying, well, how do we derive our own animation? Let's go ahead and go back to the wiki, and we're going to go ahead and copy the animation part. Paste it into here, format it a bit. Good. Okay. And let's talk about these values for a minute. Okay, because there's a lot of stuff here. We're going to call this up down. So the name of the class is important because if we were wanting to interact with this animation on the script side, we would need to also redefine these animations inside of our config CPP. We're not going to do that in this video, so maybe in a later video. The type of animation is defined by this table here. These are the only things we can do. We can rotate, we can translate, and we can hide. And so in this case, for our up-down movement, we're going to do translation Y, because I want it up and down. Alrighty. The source is what is controlling the animation. And in DayZ, we have a few sources available to us. In ARMA, there are a lot of sources, but not all of these have translated into DayZ. And so what I can guarantee works is, if we scroll down on this list, time. I can expect time to exist, and this is just a continuously moving animation phase, always incrementing up, and user. And this is script-based animation. So like when you think about a fence opening and closing, the animation source is user. If you think about just like a rotating radar dish, that's more time. So in our case, we're going to do both, but for now, I'm just going to put time because I want it to move on its own without me interfacing with it. Selection is going to be what vertices or selection are removing in the animation. And so in this case, bone 1 is the selection that we created, and we're going to put bone 1 here. Now, the next option or property here is axis, and if you're just wanting it to rotate around itself or around its origin relative to its current animation phase, and I say that way because if I have multiple bones connected, I could be kind of far away from a certain place I want to rotate around, and so you can create a specific axis to rotate around. And so in our example, we want to just rotate around ourselves. It's just going to spin in place and move up and down relative to where it started. But for like a door, we want the door to always open on a specific axis, and we'll cover that later. But for now, in this case, we're just going to leave this empty. Memory is a default property. We can get rid of that. Source address. Now, source address, we have a few options, but we only have 3. And where is it? Time. Mirror. Okay, yeah. So we can either clamp our values. So when an animation phase is above or below a value, we can clamp the phase to a certain value. We can either loop it so it goes up to its maximum and then restarts back at 0, or we can oscillate between a value or mirror. So we go up to a maximum value and then we slide back down to the maximum value. And we'll show an example of mirrored and looped. I like mirror because it looks nicer. In this case, we're going to go up, then down. If we did loop, it would go up and then restart back down at 0. Let's go ahead and showcase that quick. Since we're using translation, we don't need angle. Those are only for rotation, and so I'll go ahead and get rid of those. And my minimum value, my maximum value are 1, which is what I normally like to do, to interpolate between the values 0 and 1. In more complex animations, you might have a larger value. And this is because your animation phase, if I were to go ahead and start this into my bulldozer, you can set your animation phase by scrolling. And so if you can see, I'm scrolling my scroll wheel on the top left, you can kind of see that dark console window going up. And so time is always increasing in this case. And so our value starts at 0 and goes to 1. And since we're mirroring, we go up and then we go back down, even though the timer is above the value 1. So let's look at what happens when we clamp things. Or sorry, when we loop. So if I were to loop and time goes above 1, we're going to start back at 0 and then increment up. So you can see here, we're not going up, then down, then up, then down. We're going up and then restarting. Okay, and then if I were to clamp, what will happen is the box will get up to the top and then stay there because the animation phase is greater than 1. And so the animation doesn't reset. It just sits there as time continues to increase. And so this is how you can kind of create really complex animations that last maybe 100 ticks, and you have 100 steps. And you have step 1, move up. Step 2 is move to the right. Step 3 is move up again, and so on and so forth. So I know there's been some really cool talk on the Modders Discord about complex doors opening, like the vault doors. And this is basically how you would do that and achieve that effect. You would just chain a bunch of animations together. And so how do we chain animations together? You might be able to say, well, I already have a bone and I've already got a bone set up here and I have an animation that goes up down. Couldn't I just copy and paste this? And instead of up down, we'll do spin. And what if we did rotation Y on bone 1? Go ahead and just mirror the translations. So we go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And then for rotation, I want to do we'll do a loop. And we need the rotation again. So up here, angle 0, angle 1. Okay, so we start at 0, we'll rotate 360 degrees. This syntax right here goes like radians 360 degrees. I mean, you can just technically put radians here if you want. Yeah, I'm not going to go more into that. Anyway, let's see what this looks like. Start it. And some people will be like, well, this is going to go up, down, and rotate. And you are right. And so now you can kind of see how complex your animations can be. Because I can take the same bone, rotate it around its origin, move up and down, and do everything I want from a single bone. But what if I want to be able to pivot around a different axis or move independently of ourself? Let's go ahead and add another bone to this so that we can sort of segment things out. So we're going to bone 2, and I'm gonna be easy here and just redefine the same vertices. This is just to showcase that it can work. Ideally, you would have a second set of vertices. And we would go ahead and say new bone. So new bone 2 next to bone 1. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and change bone 2, the spin to be bone 2. And the reason why is because here in a second, I'm going to show you what happens when you change the order of the bones, because order matters here in this case. It's really important. So in this case, nothing should really change. That's how I know if I've done things right. It should still move up and down and rotate. Yeah. Not a problem. Many ways to skin this cat. Now, let's go ahead and add a third bone. Okay. Now we're kind of getting crazy. Do a third bone. We'll go ahead and redefine that. Save, and then we'll go back into here. 3 connects to bone 2. Okay. And in this case, we want it to go left, right. Left, right. This is going to be translation X. And if you are wondering what the axes are for translations, this has a nice, this one. Oops. Yeah, here you go. So you can see the y-axis is up and down, x-axis is left to right, z-axis is forward and backwards. So that helps you sort of understand which direction things are going. Alrighty, so transition X, we're going time. We're going to put this on bone 3, and we are going to also mirror this because we want it to be smooth back and forth. And yeah, if we've done this right, which it looks like we have, we get this kind of cool spiral looking thing where it rotates and goes up and down, kind of like a tornado if you think about it, right? And that's because it's moving up and down, then rotating, and since it's rotating, it's got a different origin because its face is actually facing a different direction, and so it gets translated left and right, and so it kind of goes in this weird fractal spiral pattern. That's because we have set the bones to be connected from 1, 2 to 3. So what does it look like when we change the order these bones are connected? And this is important because this is basically the meat and potatoes of animations. So bone 3, bone 2 is going to connect to bone 3, and then bone 1 is going to connect to bone 2. So we basically just, all we do is flip the order. We flip 3 and 1. They're kind of connected differently. Oops. But the behavior is going to be much different. And this is this is important because we're not going crazy. Some people would have expected, oh, it should just rotate in a different direction, and it doesn't. So it's something to noodle on a little bit. And this will be kind of the end of the first video here. You don't really need to do more than that when you're doing animations. Ideally, you should be building your animations in Bulldozer and in this kind of workflow so you can quickly iterate and not have to actually load up the game. And so when we think about loading this up in the game, like if I were to spawn this in, it would just immediately start spinning and going up and down wherever I spawned it in. And whether or not you want that to happen, like if this was a radar dish on a building, you kind of want it to always spin whenever you spawn it in. But maybe you want it to be like a powered on display case or a car or a turret on a car that's manned by a person. That's a little different. And actually, as a bonus here, we will show the difference between time because I mentioned that. So in this case, I'll put user as the source for these. So you can kind of see me flipping through the animations. So in this case, and so you use scroll wheel to increase the animation phase. So I'm scrolling and you can see that it's moving. And then you can use left and right bracket to cycle through these animations. So yeah, that's one way to really fine tune animations, rigid body ones. If you're thinking about doing more complex animations like AI, I would go look at Hunter Z's video about the workbench and animations and stuff. That's where you want to get started. But this is a good foundation because most likely he's going to ask you to read this page here, which is kind of everything we know about animations and stuff like that. So next video, we'll actually talk about doors because they are special. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.